Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Kyla Wilkinson. I am EOS Eco Energy's Climate Change Projects intern this summer. EOS is an environmental charity based in Sackville, New Brunswick. Today we've partnered with Jeff McAloon, the Chief Development Officer and co-owner of the Smart Energy Company, for today's webinar. So Jeff has prepared a presentation for us, and then we will have some times for questions at the end.
Great. Thanks very much. So again, my name is Jeff McAloon. I also have joining me from the Smart Energy Company, Robin Turner. I see we have Cal and Yungfeng. We've got a very intimate group today. So if you guys want to, and if you're in a location that permits it, I invite you to go ahead and put your camera on. I have a presentation, but given the small group, I'm really happy to kind of personalize this and make this more of a conversation if you'd like. I'm going to share my screen here. While I'm looking for the appropriate button to click, I wonder if maybe Cal or Yungfeng, if you would be comfortable just introducing yourself. Tell me just what company you're with, and what, if there's one thing that you're hoping to take away from today's session. I'd love to hear that. That would be most helpful as I go through my presentation. So feel free to unmute and say that, or if you want to chat it in the chat box, that's okay too. Yingfeng here. Hi guys, thanks for sharing.
I'll go first. Awesome. Can you guys hear me now?
Loud and clear, thanks.
Cool. All right. Thanks for sharing, guys, and good morning. I'm a incoming NYIT student here in Vancouver, actually. So I'm in Vancouver time zone. I'm an Master of Energy Management student, and I literally have no experience in energy sector, but I'm kind of interested in to learn all kinds of information in this field, especially like right now I'm considering probably doing some kind of energy saving, energy advisor type of career path. I'm kind of doing researching right now. So I wanted to know a lot of like government-based incentives and tax savings, something like that, to get to further understanding of this field and see what I can do about it when I graduate.
Well, that's great. I'm thrilled to have you here. And much of what I cover on the tax and incentive standpoint will be on the federal basis. So it will most certainly apply on BC. A little bit will be provincial based, but I'm glad to have you here.
Cool. Thanks.
I see Stefan, Jamila, and Cal. Anyone would like to unmute and just let us know what company you're with and what you hope to learn today?
Jamila Nelson. I'm with Felix.
With Felix, is that right, Jamila?
Trying to find out more about what's kind of coming into play and pretty much what all you have to offer. So just eyes wide open.
And then Jamila, did you say your company is Felix?
Velux.
Oh, Velux. Okay. And what does your company do?
We manufacture skylights.
Oh, great. Excellent. Okay. Well, thanks for being here.
Sure.
Cal or Stefan?
Hi, it's Stefan Rose. I'm just a consumer and interested in ecology and curious about the direction of solar at the moment. So that's why I'm here.
Super. And are you based in New Brunswick, Stefan?
Yes, I'm in Dorchester.
Oh, great. You're going to see one of our installations at Dorchester Community School later this summer. So glad to have you here.
Okay, great to hear that.
And Cal says his microphone doesn't work, but he works in the nonprofit. I'm sorry, maybe he, she, or they. My microphone doesn't work, but I work in the nonprofit watershed management field in New Brunswick, but we'll be relocating to BC in the next couple of years and want to learn more about tax incentives that are available across the country. Awesome. So as I said earlier, Cal, I'll be touching a lot on some of the federal incentives. So I'm going to share my screen now. Thank you, everyone. It just helps to give me some context for what's helpful. I want this to be hopefully a useful webinar for you. I will leave lots of time. Can everyone see my screen? I'm not able to see you folks anymore, so if someone could just tell me visually or audioly if you can see my screen.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, great. So again, as I said at the beginning, I do have a presentation, but it's not scripted. I'll go through, but I'm happy to pause for questions. Perhaps maybe the best thing would be just to chat, pop your question in the chat box. And then I've asked Robin to kind of keep an eye, and then I'll make sure I capture all of your questions at the end, but we'll also unmute microphones at the end and just sort of have a question period then as well. So without further ado, I'll get right into the presentation. So again, Jeff McAloon, I'm a co-owner and chief development officer of the Smart Energy Company. We're based in Quispamsis, New Brunswick. Going to chat about who we are, what we've learned since we began as a company in 2016. We'll talk about high level some of the benefits of solar, talk a little bit about the data that goes into some of the projects that we've delivered through solar feasibility studies. The meat of the presentation, I think why everyone joined today was to learn about the incentives and rebates that are available. So I'll spend a good chunk of time speaking about that, and then leave you with our contact information if you want information later. So who is the Smart Energy Company? So we are a family-based company. My brother founded the company in 2016. I joined him 2 years ago. We have a real specialty in the commercial solar and commercial battery storage sector. We work a lot in the agriculture sector. That's really our main focus. You'll hear me talk a lot today about the work we've done with farmers. I would say probably 90 or 95% of our projects perhaps have been in the agriculture sector. And I'll talk about what we've learned from farmers over the time. We also manufacture in St. John the Nor'easter Solar Farm, and so the Nor'easter Solar Farm is a commercial grade ground mounted solar farm kit. It's the entire system from soup to nuts, if you will. So from the ground anchoring to the racking and the modules and the inverter and all the electrical components. We have built and designed the Nor'easter and reiterated that design over many years to ensure that it is really robust and optimized for harsh climates. When we started building solar farms years ago, we were buying products from other manufacturers, products that were designed and manufactured in other parts of the world. And we were very soon realizing that they just were not withstanding our harsh snow, our harsh winds, our unpredictable winds. We're a maritime climate, so we're a high moisture area. And we just weren't satisfied with the durability of the products that we were buying in our early days. And so we have engineered our own ground mounted system. If you had heard recently in the news, NB Power has just announced the commissioning of their first utility scale solar farm, and that was our Nor'easter product that was installed there. So the Nor'easter was the very first commercial solar farm that was connected to the grid many years ago. Now the largest installation on the grid, and over our time as a company, over 50% of the grid tied solar projects in the province have been installed by the Smart Energy Company. Okay, so just really quickly, our mission, again, I said earlier, we really focus and specialize in the agriculture sector. We really firmly believe that over the next 20 years, every single farmer that you know and farmers that you don't know, they're going to transition to generating at least a portion or maybe even all of their electricity from renewable sources on their property. And so we're on a mission to provide farmers long-term value by giving them a really trusted, an easy to expand, and a simple modular renewable energy solution. Farmers don't want complexity, they want something simple. And so that is why we are here and why we exist, to help save our planet, working with our farmers. We've learned a lot from our farm customers over the years. We learn every day that we work with a farmer. And I would say that these are the four, among the many lessons we've learned, these are the four most important themes that we hear over and over and over again when we work with farmers. And I would suggest that these are likely important points for any of you in your businesses. These are not unique to farmers. It's just what we've learned from farmers. So farmers want projects that are simple to integrate, easy to integrate. They don't want something that's going to add to an already long to-do list. They don't want regular maintenance. They don't want systems that are going to break down. They don't want systems that they have to think about. If they can install something, leave it to do its job and to forget about it, that's an ideal situation for them. I didn't mention this under simple to integrate, but I also consider sort of easy to expand in that same bucket. Often farmers will want to pilot something and try something, and to have something that's easy to expand in the future is an important value for them. Optimization. Farmers their businesses have very, very thin margins, and some of them are in marketing boards that limit or restrict their ability to control their top line revenue. So if they want to grow their business, sometimes it's not just as simple as selling more. Sometimes they're limited by that. And so the only other option for a business to maintain its profitability is to look at its costs. So farmers are very, very cognizant of their input costs, seed, fertilizer, electricity, for example. One of my favorite conversations with a farmer as he was trying to understand, the difference between a kilowatt hour and a kilowatt. I tried to simplify it as best I could. Again, I'm not a technical person either, so that sort of helped. But I said, don't think about kilowatt hours and kilowatts when it comes to solar. Think about your input costs. And if you could buy the next 30 years of the fertilizer that you need, if you could buy that today at half of today's cost, would you do it? And the farmer, I will not say the expletive that he said, but he said, well, of course I would. That's a no-brainer. And I said, well, think of solar the same way. You can buy your electricity for the next 30 years at half of today's cost. So farmers are very keen on finding ways to reduce or maintain their input costs. And of course, environment. Our farmers' businesses run by the sun. Without the sun, they wouldn't be here. And so this solar energy or solar generation is another way that they can use the sun to improve their business. Farmers think obviously keenly and carefully about the environment and looking after their farm practice for generations to come. Like me, you will have seen a lot more talk in the media about regenerative farm practices. Farming is changing and farming is becoming much more scientific and farming is becoming much more sustainable. And so solar energy generation is a natural fit for the farming sector. And finally, and I referred to this earlier, we live in a pretty harsh climate here in the Maritimes. We get some, you folks in BC have some harsh climate maybe in other ways, but we've got some pretty harsh winter storms. We have some pretty harsh winter winds, and sometimes they're unpredictable. We have ice storms. And so again, farmers and arguably most or all commercial clients do not want to install something that's not going to last for the long term. And so, again, right back to our early days as a company, when we were installing another manufacturer's product in the middle of a farm field, you can guarantee that in the worst night in the middle of February with the nor'easter storms blowing, that product didn't survive. And so we've adapted our product to make sure that it will always survive those types of harsh winds. We were really proud the installation that we did for MB Power in Shediac, their commercial solar farm, the night of Hurricane Fiona. We didn't sleep a lot because we were nervous about what would actually, whether the work we had done in the testing lab and on paper would actually bear fruit in real life. And we were happy to see that when we went to site the next morning after Fiona, not a bit of damage, just not, you didn't even know that a hurricane had blown through. So durability is really important to our customers. So many of you, I'm sure in this call, are very familiar with solar. So please forgive me if this is too elementary, but I thought it was worth just touching on 5 of them. There are many benefits of solar, but these are some of the 5 that we hear about most often. Obviously, cost reduction, as I alluded to earlier. There's sometimes a misnomer in our province that solar is not cost effective, and that's just simply not true. We wouldn't be here as a company for 7 years now if that was the case. And so solar energy can be produced on a commercial scale anywhere from 6 to maybe in small projects 9 cents a kilowatt hour, which is much less than what a residential customer would pay today or commercial customer. So cost reduction, also cost stability. Many of our farm customers, in fact, we've done some projects for municipalities as well, and municipalities are really keen on understanding that by establishing a solar PV system, they'll know what their energy costs will be for the next 25 to 30 years. It's very predictable to know what that cost will be, and it's that cost stability can help with planning greatly. Clearly, emission reductions. Every one of our projects, we precisely calculate the number of CO2 emissions that are no longer put into the atmosphere by replacing grid-generated electricity with solar-generated electricity. All of our systems are battery ready. In fact, if I look at the little crystal ball on my desk, and I really and firmly believe that we're going to see so many more projects that involve battery. Some of the federal incentives I'm going to talk about in a few minutes include battery adoption. So we've been doing battery projects for many years. We've done some small scale battery on the residential side, but our primary work is on the commercial side. And so we have a number of different customers that obviously want reliability or continuity of power in the event of a grid outage. And that in New Brunswick today is the most important or the most common reason for adopting battery. What many of those customers who are adopting battery know or will soon know that they're readying themselves for the future in a way that most others aren't. There will come a day in the not too distant future when customers will pay different rates for electricity that is purchased at different times of day. And so, there will be presumably a higher charge for electricity that is purchased at peak times. A customer that has battery with or without solar will be able to benefit from having that battery more than just a backup power solution, but they'll be able to draw power from their battery when it's more expensive from the grid, and then to switch back to the grid when it's least expensive. There are also many commercial customers that pay very high fees on demand charges. And of course, the battery solution can help them reduce those costs as well. So lots of benefits to batteries, and we're seeing lots and lots more of those installations these days. And I guess I'm not going to beat this horse anymore because I've already talked about how the nor'easter is really optimized for harsh climates. So among all of those reasons, often for commercial clients, the largest conversation is around how much is this going to cost me? What are my savings? Those sort of financial economic conversations. And so historically, we have talked about, in New Brunswick at least, we've talked about energy costs increasing by about 2.5% year over year. And that's been helpful for a planning tool as we project into the future what energy is going to cost. Now we are being told we're a authorized solar feasibility study provider for NB Power. Now we're being told that we should be modeling something more like 5.7% for the next fairly long term. With solar, as I said earlier, it can be anywhere from 5, 6, maybe 9 cents a kilowatt hour, depending on the size of the project. And those are the levelized costs for the life of that project. So when we make these projections in our studies for customers, we model based on the 30 years of warranted solar production from the solar manufacturers. We know the solar modules will produce for longer, but we conservatively forecast based on what the solar warranty that comes from the manufacturer. There is, of course, a degradation for any solar module over time, but we work those all in as well. Speaking of solar feasibility studies, just really quickly, again, I know this wasn't necessarily the focus of our chat today, but I wanted you to know some of the options, some of the work that we do to help detail and provide customers with information. Obviously, from a business standpoint, when you're looking at any capital cost, and sometimes these are significant capital costs, you want to have a lot of data to make sure that you're making the right decisions for your business. And so we're a solar feasibility study provider for NB Power. And that entails a really detailed site visit. We look at the at least 12 months of consumption history. We design a theoretical solar model for the customer that fits with their property, with their desire, with their needs. And then we give them a full breakdown of all the rebates and tax incentives that can be different from customer to customer. So we personalize that for the customer's business. And then finally, the study includes all of the costs, the capital costs, the operating costs, and the savings and the emissions details as well. So that's what's involved in our solar feasibility studies. Okay, so now the meat and potatoes, I guess, of the subject matter of the webinar today. We're going to talk about incentives, rebates, and return on investment. So I will just a disclaimer. I'm going to talk about tax incentives and rebates. I am not an accountant and I'm not a tax advisor. It's absolutely critical that if you're looking at this sort of initiative for your business that you consult with your professionals. So please don't take this as a tax advice. I will tell you, however, I have spent a significant amount of time researching, talking with tax experts. I've even connected with one of the lawyers at CRA in Toronto who's working on the legislation currently. So I've done a lot of homework, but tax is a complex thing and it's different from business to business. So it's really important that you get your own personal advice. So when it comes to incentives and rebates for commercial solar, There are the very first one for the folks in BC. This one would not apply to you, although I'm certain that there likely is a provincial type rebate or incentive for you in British Columbia. But in New Brunswick, we have two efficiency programs that are funded federally, but administered through MB Power's New Brunswick Efficiency Program. And that's the CBRP, the Commercial Building Retrofit Program, IEEP, the Industrial Energy Efficiency Program. So both of those programs offer incentives and rebates. On the front end, they offer rebates and incentives for the cost of a feasibility study, some, or in some cases, all of the cost of a feasibility study. So clients go into these projects with really concrete data. And then finally, they offer production rebates based on the size of the solar system. There are not, in this program, there are not currently rebates for battery, but there are for solar. Next is the Atlantic Investment Tax Credit. Again, sorry, West Coast friends, this one wouldn't apply to you. You're not in the Atlantic. But the Atlantic Investment Tax Credit system is part of our tax code, our federal tax code. It's for certain industries in Atlantic Canada, farming, aquaculture, some manufacturing and processing. So there's a list of maybe 5 or 6 actually different industries that are eligible for this investment tax credit. And it's a 10% refundable tax credit. So an input tax credit that's essentially cash. It would reduce your taxes payable at the end of the year. The third one, and you've likely heard something about this recently. This is a real significant change in the federal tax code that was announced as part of the March 2023 budget, and it's called the Clean Technology Investment Tax Credit. It was actually announced in November or October, I think, the fall economic update, and then it was part of the budget in federal budget March 2023. And so this is a 30% refundable tax credit on the capital cost of investments in wind, solar, battery, for example. It was modeled after a very similar program in the United States. And we're really happy that this sort of puts us on somewhat uneven footing with the United States in terms of commercial incentives for adopting clean energy. It can get a little complicated because, far be it from the federal government to make things simple. They've also announced in the budget clean electricity investment tax credit, and that is a 15% refundable tax credit, but that's for non-tax paying entities. So it's municipalities, for First Nations groups, for utilities. My contact at CRA in Toronto tells me that there's still a lot of work to be done on the crossing the T's and the I's on this. So it will be implemented at its projects starting this year are eligible, but the incentives won't be awarded until after the 2024 budget. So there's still some question on whether this may even be extended to nonprofit organizations. We're hopeful. The solar industry is certainly lobbying for that, but there's further consultations with federal government over the summer. But what we do know is that this clean technology investment credit is eligible for projects as of the day after the March 2023 budget, and that is a 30%. Again, a refundable tax credit means it's essentially cash. It reduces taxes payable. So it's a very, very valuable incentive for commercial businesses. And then the next one is what's called the accelerated capital cost allowance. And again, this is already part of our tax code. This is not a new announcement. It's actually it's a way to, again, I'm not an accountant and I don't know if anyone else on the call is, so please don't laugh at my simplified explanation if you are, but when a business buys a capital asset, they can depreciate the value of that asset over the expected life. And so as a hypothetical, and again, please don't hold me to the details, but if a farmer bought a tractor that has a useful life of 20 years, they can divide the cost of that tractor over those 20 years. And each of the 20 years, they're able to reduce their taxable income by that amount. So essentially 1/20th, in a very, very simple way of explaining it, over the 20 years. So with clean energy projects, a commercial customer can put 100% of the value of the project to depreciate in the very first year. And so I'm going to show you an example in a few minutes, but essentially, if a customer bought a $10,000 renewable energy asset, they can reduce their taxable income by the full $10,000 in the very first year. So if they are a small business, they would save 11.5% corporate tax on that. If they're a large business, they'd save 29% corporate tax on that. So with the combination of these, the provincial efficiency program and the federal tax code items in number 2, 3, and 4, we're seeing that the simple payback for a commercial solar installation in New Brunswick is anywhere from 6 to 9 years. For friends that are on this call who are in other provinces, just know that New Brunswick has one of, I think possibly the second lowest electricity rate in the country. Our residential and farm customers pay 12 cents a kilowatt hour. We know that in other jurisdictions, you pay a whole lot more than that. And so that 6 to 9 year simple return on investment would be much lower in other jurisdictions where you're paying a higher rate for electricity. And I promise I'm almost done. I'm going to stop for some questions. I thought I would take you through just a hypothetical example to put all of that tax talk into real dollars. So let's just imagine a theoretical scenario where the capital cost of a solar project for business was $45,000. The very first incentive is the commercial business the commercial building retrofit program incentive. I've based this on that picture, the image that you see on the left is a 10 kilowatt nor'easter system, and based on the energy that will produce in the first year, the cash rebate would be $2,900. Next is that Atlantic investment tax credit. And so we take the capital cost minus the first rebate, and the business would experience a 10% refundable tax credit of $4,200. Next is this big one. I love seeing this, the 30% clean tech. So that's a little over $11,000 that the customer would receive when they do their year end. And then finally, that accelerated depreciation. So the first 3 rebates here, the CBRP, the AITC, and the clean tech, those are all refundable tax credits, meaning that when you have taxes payable at the end of the year, that will reduce your taxes payable. If that reduces you to below 0, you'll get the difference in a cash refund. The accelerated depreciation works a little differently. If that $3,000 reduces your taxable income, and so you will still have taxes payable, but you'll have less taxes payable. It wouldn't ever take you into a cash refund situation. So just a little bit of a difference there. So all in all, there's over $21,000 in incentives, and that initial $45,000 project is now a net cost of a little over $23,000. So almost half. You notice I haven't talked about any grants. I haven't talked about federal or provincial applications. We actually don't talk about those a lot with our customers. Some of our customers choose to go down that path. We've had more of our customers be really frustrated by those grant opportunities. Grant opportunities take time to fill out applications. They have application deadlines, and they have funding envelopes that are exhausted. And so we've heard from many, many customers that they take the time away from the business to fill out a really complex grant application, only to learn that they missed the deadline, or maybe to learn that 6 or 8 or 12 months later that the funding envelope was exhausted and they weren't eligible anymore. And so now they've gone another 6, 8, or 12 months without improving their input cost with solar, and they were disappointed with the result through filing for a grant. Don't get me wrong, if you can get a grant, that's fantastic, but most of our commercial customers want to get to work, want to get solar to work on their business for all the reasons we talked about earlier, and they want to move on to the next project. They want to move on to improving the revenue and not worry about waiting for a grant that may or may not come through. So that is it for my presentation. I'm just going to, I'll maybe ask Kyla if she can email the presentation to everyone afterwards so that you've got our contact information. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing, and I invite anyone to come on camera, or stay off camera if you'd like to, come off mute. And if you'd like to ask any questions, I'm happy to field questions.
I have a question.
Hi, Jamila.
Hey, how are you?
Great.
Good. So I know here in the States, they have like new programs that are in place, like a pollinator program. Not so much for agriculture, but it falls more for businesses. So if they were to put up solar systems or solar energy systems in their area, they can actually, promote pollinators and stuff like that. Do you guys have that where you are? Do you partner with those groups at all with these setups with farmers and whatnot? Just to kind of
That's a really neat question. I'm not aware of any grant programs, but I will tell you there sort of two aspects of that we've been involved with that may be similar. If anyone here has heard of McCain fries, if you've had a French fry, there's in the world, anywhere in the world, it's probably a pretty good chance it was made by McCain's. And so McCain's has launched an initiative a year or so ago called the Farms of the Future in Florenceville, New Brunswick, where they are implementing regenerative soil practices, regenerative farming practices, and new technology to help create the farm of the future. So we were really pleased that they selected us and the Nor'easter to be their solar farm for all of the reasons we talked about, those 5 benefits I talked about. But also, interestingly, they're doing some experimenting with some of the seeds that they're putting under the solar farm for pollination purposes. We don't have, I think it's a fairly early study for them, so we don't have any results. But that's one aspect I think that's sort of close to the question you had. The other is again, it's not a formal program, it's not a scientific research project, but there's been a lot of interesting farm applications. One of the patented aspects of our Nor'easter solar farm is that it doesn't require perimeter fencing. The electrical material is all integrated within the frame, and so most farmers don't put a fence around. However, we had one farmer decided to put a fence around their solar farm because they wanted to keep their sheep in. They didn't want to keep the animals out. They wanted to keep them in to mow the grass and to keep them away from other farm business. So while it's not an example of a pollinating program like you're talking about, I think it's just a neat example of how farmers are finding different ways to incorporate solar into their property.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Daniel, go ahead.
I'm curious, you mentioned the feasibility study. I think you specifically said solar feasibility study, but I'm just curious for a business who wants to have a feasibility study, what the range or how you would bill that out.
How we bill the like you talk
Yeah.
about the cost of feasibility studies?
Exactly.
Yeah, they really they're somewhat variable depending on the complexity of the property. And so, we also try to keep in mind that there is those incentive programs through MB Power. So we try to keep in mind those incentive programs and balance it against the complexity of what we think the design will be, so that the customer can be as little out of pocket, in some cases not out of pocket at all. The way those incentives work, I presume, Daniel, you're in New Brunswick, are you?
Yes, that's correct.
So the way that those incentives work in the provincial program, if you are a commercial client, so if you have a general service, or if you're a farmer and you have a residential meter, MB Power will rebate the cost of your study based on the square footage of your facility, or the combination of your facilities if you have multiple buildings. And they will provide that rebate up to a cap once you've installed some portion of the recommended solar that's designed. On the industrial side, if you're an industrial metered client, then that program will fund 50% of the feasibility study before you even decide to implement anything, and then a further 50% once the project is implemented.
Okay, so say if I have a 1,500 square foot, I'm not sure, I'm in an industrial park, so I'm not sure if
Okay.
that would be considered industrial. That would potentially be 50% upfront. And with the square footage, how do you know how to do quick math around that as far
Yeah,
as?
so if you're an industrial park, there's probably a good chance that you would fall into the industrial program. We could look at your meter, your rate bill to tell you for sure. But the industrial program actually doesn't really matter about your square footage.
Okay.
So yeah, if you want to reach out to us afterwards, Daniel, we can help. We can point you to the spot in your power bill where you'll be able to tell for sure whether you're industrial or general
Okay,
service.
I've got a bill right in front of me.
Oh, great. Yeah, so you want to look for the rate code.
Okay. Actually, it said that, okay, and the rate code will be. Oh, their rate category, general service 1.
General service, yeah. So you would fall into the commercial program, and they base the square footage on 3 tiers. And you're going to test my memory here. I think it's the first tier is up to 15,000 square feet. The next tier is up to 75,000 square feet, and the third tier is beyond 75,000 square feet.
Okay, so I'd be below the first tier, whatever that would mean.
Yeah, so you're under the first tier. I think the rebate is about $1,100. So, again, if it's a fairly simple property with, not a lot of complexity to the electrical design, you might be out of pocket $300 or $400 at the end of the study.
Okay.
I should say too, given that you're a business, all of that same tax code that I was talking about, the refundable tax credits and the depreciation, you're actually able to depreciate some operational costs for renewable energy projects as well. So let's just say you were the business after the rebate from NB Power had to pay $400 or $500. That $400 or $500 is also fully depreciable on your taxes as well. So there's a lot of really great incentives for commercial businesses.
Okay. I have one more question if
Yeah, go ahead.
no one else is jumping. Now, a lot of things you mentioned are great for a business who doesn't have a lot of carry forward losses for input tax credits.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like a lot of the programs are geared that way to a business that is showing a profit on their books. And I'm just curious what there is as far as businesses that are, especially new business,
Mm-hmm.
where there's not that money coming in that really another
Yep.
credit is really going to help.
Yep, I get you. It's actually, so I might not have explained this really well, but especially that 30% refundable tax credit. One of the things that excited me the most about that, again, as I said, we work a lot in the farming sector. I don't know if you know farmers, but farmers don't make a lot of money. God love them. They keep us fed and nourished, and they really do not make a lot of money. So at the end of the year, when they add up all their bills, very often they're in a loss situation. That 30% refundable tax credit is actually a refundable tax credit irregardless of your profitability. And so it reduces your taxes payable. So let's just imagine a year you've had a bad business year, and you have $0 of taxable income. So you have $0 of taxes payable. The 30% refundable tax credit is issued to you in a tax refund, a cash refund.
Okay. I remember you saying something about that, but I wasn't.
Yeah, that's the real magic of them. Whereas that depreciation, that accelerated depreciation, you need to have taxable income to count that against. And so if you have a year where you don't have taxable income, then you just carry that forward to another year. But what I love about that 30% refundable tax credit, specifically for farmers and small businesses, new businesses, like you said, it's a really valuable cash incentive.
All right. Actually, I've got one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are there any, like, for me to take a jump and say, oh, I'll spend $300 or $400 to have someone in, only to come up with nothing, as opposed to if there was some kind of a case study you had that said, hey, this is, some different scenarios of, maybe a commercial property or a farm property and how everything, I mean, I know you had some numbers in the presentation earlier, how they boiled down. But I was just curious if you had many other case studies like that for a small commercial.
Yeah, I think what I'd recommend is let's connect afterwards. And if you give me a bit more, I wouldn't ask you to do this on a public call, but give me a bit better understanding of your business, your physical location. We've done so much of this that we would have a very early sense of whether it's worth your while to do a feasibility study or not. I'll tell you, it's rare that solar will not be applicable, but there are some cases. There are some cases where the physical property for a ground mount system is just not there, or the shading just is really going to make it problematic, or maybe the roof structure is really not appropriate. So there are some cases where solar generation would not be a value add for business, but I would say they're rare. And I think if we had a conversation, so if I better understood your property, your business, and those sort of factors, I'd pretty quickly be able to tell you which of those buckets you fit into.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no trouble. Thanks for your questions.
You're welcome.
I see Stefan off mute.
Yes. Yep. I've got a quick question. Just wondering, in the case of, are you doing residential installations as well as all those large industrial?
I wouldn't say it's not our focus. The residential jobs we have worked on are more around battery storage. And so customers will often come to us for a battery backup solution, and some of those will incorporate solar, and those we've got a lot of experience with, but just sort of a straightforward. I should also be careful how I say that. There are some rural customers where a ground mount system like the Nor'easter is appropriate. And so we would work with those folks, but a standard sort of rooftop solution in a residential neighborhood is not really our bailiwick.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, great. We still have a couple more minutes here, so happy to take any other questions. Casey or Cal, Yunfeng?
Actually, I have another question for you.
Yeah, fire away.
Just out of curiosity in relation to the the large systems that you said were installed for Shediac and outside of St. John, how large are those systems, and what is the generation capacity on those?
Yeah, so the largest installation in the province was the Shediac solar farm, and that's a 1.68 megawatt solar farm. And that was commissioned in February of this year.
Okay, and then in terms of that capacity, when we talk about, how many homes would that power in, or is it focused on the municipal infrastructure to sort of feed that?
Yeah, great question. So I'll give you sort of two answers. One, more of an analogy that would power the equivalent of approximately 175 homes, let's say. In reality, that project is direct grid connected and is part of a larger Smart Grid Atlantic project that NB Power, Nova Scotia Power, and Siemens partnered on. And so NB Power will talk about that as providing enough energy for 2 commercial facilities in Shediac to be essentially net zero. In reality, the power is all going back to the grid. And of course, as you know, electricity will go to where it's needed first. But I think that's sort of 2 examples to sort of give you the sense of how much power is being generated by that installation.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, I'm counting to 3 elephants, which someone told me is what you need to do when you're waiting for questions. Okay, I'm not hearing any more questions. So again, thanks EOS, and Kyla for inviting us. We're really, really happy. We're pretty passionate about solar energy and battery, and we're happy to take these opportunities. Feel free to reach out anyone afterwards. I'll ask EOS to forward our contact information and our presentation. And if you'd like to engage with us afterwards for other questions, we'd love to do that.
Is it easy to stick around for a minute right now? And
I most certainly can. I guess that's a question for Kyla, who's the host. Are we able to stay on the webinar now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm also going to put my cell phone in the chat. If anyone wants to contact me directly, feel free to do that. I'll put my email address here as well.
oh, could you start the video, please?
No, I'm the host of the call.
Oh, yeah, but can you oh, so you mean there's only video for 2, or?
Are you, is that something you do on your end, Daniel? Like, do you have the camera option, or?
I do, but it says the host has stopped it.
Ah, okay. There we
Hey,
go. How are you, Daniel?
excellent, thanks. How about
Good to
yourself?
see you face to face. Great.
Likewise. So, as far as the commercial side of it, well, I mean, it's roughly a 1,500 square foot Quonset hut here in the industrial park. It's got a boiler for heat. So in the winter, it's around $500 a month for mostly heating. Most of the time, it's just myself in the shop.
Okay.
We've got 200 amp, 600 volt feed, and then we step down to 208. So
Okay.
there's a combination of machines, mostly either running 208 or 600 volt, some 10 horsepower motors, some hydraulic pumps, some odds and ends. And right now, there's not a whole lot running a lot of the time.
Okay.
But depending on what work comes in, or looking at some different scenarios, to just trying to keep some ideas for the future.
Okay. Tell me a bit about the physical property where you are. Which industrial park are you in, by the way?
Sackville.
Sackville. Okay. And tell
Yeah.
me a bit about the property that you're on.
So it's just a big gravel parking lot, and
Okay.
actually the side of the building has evacuated. Uh, what the heck are those? The evacuated solar tubes for basically a boiler system, and that's been disconnected years ago. So with the Quonset hut running sort of east-west on the property,
Okay.
that wall, there's actually an angle to that wall. So theoretically, something could be on that side of the building. I don't know if it would be the perfect angle or not
Okay.
as far as a direct mount, but
What about would you so a direct mount is okay, but it's not ideal because of our weather. And so often there's a couple of factors when you look at putting either on a building or on the roof. Obviously the tilt, if it's not an optimal tilt, that can reduce the power. If the azimuth is not as close to 180 degrees as possible, that can impact the production as well. And then of course there can be some structural considerations. So our go-to is always to look at ground space. So you would need a minimum of under 500 square feet of ground space on your property. The closer to your facility, the better. But anywhere within 200 feet of the facility of the electrical entrance. So would you say your property has suitable space for ground-mounted solar?
well, I guess there's a narrow swath before there's a hill.
Okay.
That's heavy, somewhat heavy traffic, transport trucks running by, the odd
Okay.
a lot of pickup trucks. So there's a little spot before there's a grade, maybe from 10 to 15 feet wide
Okay.
along the side of the building. So there would be a way to do some type of ground mount.
Okay. And
And
maybe it's a combination. Maybe
that would be a
there's
60, the building's 60 feet long, so it would be a 60-foot long.
okay. So you've
Um,
got a fair good chunk of space there. So you might be able to do both. You might be able to do some ground mount and roof mount or building mount as well. In terms of the energy usage that you described for the motors and the types of energy, if you're looking at just a solar energy system, it really doesn't matter how you're using electricity, whether it's single phase or three phase, doesn't matter. I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. We have to incorporate that into the design, but solar will produce the electricity and it can be used however you like. The only, I guess the caveat to that is if you look at backup battery. And so there are some backup battery solutions that will provide single phase power only, and there are other battery backup solutions that will provide single or three phase power. So if you wanted to look at a resiliency option with battery, that would be one uniqueness that we'd have to look at. But again, there are solutions for both of those scenarios. But just for
and then-
purely solar, really doesn't matter how you use the electricity.
right. No, I just thought in terms of how that ties into the building and
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We've tied into every kind of building you can imagine, from cow. How can I put this? From very clean, brand new electrical rooms to electrical rooms that are covered in cow byproduct. Let's put it that way. In terms of what you would expect from a feasibility study, we would do a site visit so that we have eyes on your electrical infrastructure, so we can tell you what, if any, changes would be needed to your existing electrical infrastructure. Sometimes changes are needed, sometimes it's not. We would look at least 12 months of your energy consumption. And then we would model design that would be most likely ground, possibly some building mounted as well. And then the report would give you obviously the details of what capital costs you should expect to implement solar. And you don't have to implement all of it at once. You can do it in phases. But more importantly, it'll give you a real specific details on how much it will reduce your $500 a month power bill. Will tell you specifically how many tons of CO2 will be reduced from being emitted from switching to solar power. And it will detail, based on your particular business, what incentives and tax rebates you're eligible for.
okay. So there's no from what I've shared, there's no like, oh, here's how the numbers might boil down.
I don't see anything that's going to be complex. I would say that, you'd be maybe $1,500 or $2,000 for a feasibility study. Well, your square footage you said was under 15,000 square feet.
Yeah, it's more like 1,500 square feet.
Yep. So you'd be eligible for $1,100 rebate from MB Power. And yeah, I'd say that's probably the nuts and bolts of it.
Sorry, in this study, it said somewhere $3,000 to $4,000.
Oh gosh, no, under $2,000.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know how sorry, the study would be around
Yeah,
$2,000.
that's right.
All right. I don't know what else I would ask.
Okay. Well, look, I put my info in the chat, and Kyla's going to send out our info. Feel free to reach out afterwards. Happy to chat.
All right,
I
thanks.
love any excuse to come down to Sackville. It's my alma mater is there. Met my wife there. I love coming to town whenever I can.
Oh, and just out of curiosity, so I guess as far as, I mean, there's no real stages of, it's like either you do a $2,000 study and that's pretty much, I'm just trying to think of,
Look, I'm sorry, I should have explained this. We can give you a very simple sort of a one-page preliminary analysis. That would, probably be a great place for you to start, where you give me an estimate of what your energy bill is. We look at your property online and we do just a very simple theoretical model that'll give you a ballpark of what's the opportunity for solar and the costs and the incentives. The
Right.
feasibility study really gets into the nuts and bolts and the real specifics for your business, but you'll get a really good general sense with just a simple outline that we do no charge.
okay. Actually, I've got one other question.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I love
Yeah,
this, Daniel. I can talk about this all day long.
do you find much of a mix as far as, especially on the commercial side, where people who are leasing compared to people who own? Because right now I lease.
Mhm.
So that's another thing in terms of, how much legwork, time do I invest that I might not get out of it depending on.
Yeah, good
There's a
question.
different,
So I'd have to, I'm gonna guess the power bills, are they in your business name?
no,
They're in the person you lease from. So the first rebates that I mentioned, those efficiency rebates, those would be rebates that would be driven by and for the owner of the electrical meter. So that's someone that you lease from. They would be they would be eligible for those. All of those
Okay.
other tax incentives I talked about, those are for the business that is purchasing the asset. So if you as a person who leases, if your business is paying for the asset, then you would benefit from all of those incentives.
right.
But the first incentive on the feasibility study and the first production rebate is based on the owner of the electrical meter.
Okay, actually, now that you're saying that, this actually might make it more tangible in terms of the landlord that owns the property,
Mm-hmm.
the business is making a profit. It might make more sense for them to own all that and get that. And then if it somehow becomes deducted off my rent or
Yep.
reduces overhead costs here,
There you
it'd
go.
be a win-win.
Yeah,
Okay, well,
exactly.
that's a whole other,
Yeah, super.
yeah, I guess it's just for me to have some quick and dirty numbers to play around with, where that's the part where I'm not super clear, where I
Yeah,
don't.
if you want to send me an email, Daniel, and tell me what your, I think you said $500 is your power bill, give me your street address. And I can have someone on our team just do a real quick preliminary. So it'll give you ballpark figures, and you could have a conversation with your landlord.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's very helpful. Actually, or do you want to write it down, or I can just put it in.
Yeah, if you want to email it to me, then I'll flip that
Perfect.
to one of our clean energy consultants.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thanks again.
Yeah, great questions.
All right, well, I try. Have a great
Awesome.
day.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks again for everything. Bye.
Kyla, anything else from your viewpoint?
No, I think that's everything. So I'll just wrap up the
Okay.
recording now.
Very good. Thanks so much for inviting us. Take
Thank
care.
you so much. Bye.
Bye now.